warned about with the highest death rate. We just reached a new horrible milestone of new cases. On a policy level, what's going to be different starting on January 20th when you take office when it comes to dealing with the pandemic?
Well, there's going to be a couple things. Number one, it's going to be important we set out national standards and let the, look, we met with governors, Democrat and Republican, as well as 50 Democrat and Republican mayors. And they said they need guidance. They need guidance. They know, and they're going to need a fair amount of money. It's one thing for us to talk about being able to get help out there, but it's not getting there. We're having these hospital stays are overwhelming hospitals right now. There's a need for more financial assistance. There's more financial assistance needed as well when the vaccine comes forward. There's need for planning. And so now the administration has been cooperating with us of late, letting them know what their plans are for the COVID virus, for how they're going to deliver on the vaccine. But there's not any help getting out there. And look at all the businesses that are being hurt so badly. No money to help them. Come Christmas time, there's going to be millions of people who see their unemployment run out. So there's a whole range of things that have to be done, and we have to ante up. I'm hoping, and we've talked about this, I'm hoping the Senate in this lame duck session will come up with some help to make sure we can keep people moving, keep people in their, even if their jobs, even if they have to close restaurants and bars, they're able to maintain their business while they're out. And so there's a whole lot of things that have to be done quickly.
All right, I'll get to the legislative part of this in a second. But before I do, Madam Vice President-elect, Pfizer and Moderna have applied for emergency use authorization for the vaccines. Are you confident that if and when the FDA does give that approval, it will be safe and effective, and will you take it?
Of course I will. And but we also want to make sure that the American people know that we are committed, the President-elect and I talk about this all the time, that the people who need it most are going to be a priority. We've talked a lot about the need to take care of our frontline workers, as the President-elect was talking about. He and I, over the Thanksgiving holiday, for example, made a number of calls to nurses who are describing horrendous conditions in terms of the risk to their own safety to do the work of saving the lives of others. So we want to make sure that the people who need to get it first are going to be there. But of course we'll take it, and I'll take it.
Obviously, those frontline workers are important, but you are too, sir, and you will be the oldest president ever inaugurated. Do you plan to get vaccinated before Inauguration Day, and will you do it in public the way that Presidents Obama, Bush, and Clinton have suggested they're willing to?
I'd be happy to do that. When Dr. Fauci says we have a vaccine that is safe, that's the moment in which I will stand before the public and see that, look, part of what has to happen, Jake, and you know as well as I do, people have lost faith in the ability of the vaccine to work. Already the numbers are really staggeringly low. And it matters what a president and a vice president do. And so I think that my three predecessors have set the model as to what should be done, saying once it's declared to be safe, and then I think Barack said once Fauci says it's clear, that's my measure, then obviously we take it. And it's important to communicate to the American people, it's safe. It's safe to do this.
Speaking of Fauci, have you spoken with him yet? If so, have you asked him to stay on?
Yes and yes.
Yes and yes. Tell me about the conversation. Well, he said what more needs to be done from his point of view.
Well, look, my chief of staff has worked with him in the last crisis. He's been talking to him all the time, Ron Klain. I talked to him today. We spoke today at 3 o'clock. My COVID team met with him. I asked him to stay on in the exact same role he's had for the past several presidents. And I asked him to be a chief medical advisor for me as well and be part of the COVID team. And so what has to be done is we have to make it clear to the American people that the vaccine is safe when it occurred, when that is determined. And number two, you have to make sure, as he points out, you don't have to close down the economy like a lot of folks are talking about now. If, in fact, you have clear guidance and you're able to say to businesses, okay, for example, bars and restaurants are going to close, but we're going to provide you the wherewithal to not lose your business like the House had passed. And we're going to be able to reopen. We're going to be able to reopen in time and not to close down for long periods of time. We talked about masking. It is important that we, in fact, the president and the vice president, we set the pattern by wearing masks. But beyond that, where the federal government has authority, I'm going to issue a standing order that in federal buildings you have to be masked, and in transportation, interstate transportation, you must be masked in airplanes and buses, etc. And so it's a matter of, and I think my inclination, Jake, is on the first day I'm inaugurated to say I'm going to ask the public for 100 days to mask. Just 100 days to mask. Not forever, 100 days. And I think we'll see a significant reduction if we occur that, and that occurs with vaccinations and masking to drive down the numbers considerably.
Operation Warp Speed seems to have been a big success to get the vaccine going. I know there's a lot to criticize about how President Trump handled the crisis of the pandemic, but do you give him credit for Operation Warp Speed?
Well, yeah, look, the fact we got the vaccine is a good idea, but I mean, it's important, critically important. But as you know, Jake, one of the vaccines requires 2 shots, one shot, and the fact is that it's one thing to get the vaccine delivered in cases, some frozen, some not, and another thing to get the vaccine to move from the case to a vaccination in someone's arm. That's the really complicated piece. When I met with the Republican and Democratic governors and mayors, they said, we need help on how to do that. One was certain they were able to do it in their state, just get me the vaccine, I can do it. But it's an incredibly expensive proposition. That's why we're continuing to hope that the Senate does something in response to the immediate need to provide dollars. But we're going to need a lot more. It's going to cost literally billions of dollars to get this done. We can keep schools open, we can keep businesses open, but you have to be able to get the vaccine distributed. And Jake, the last thing, I think they started off with, based on my team that's met with them, with focusing on first responders, meaning doctors, nurses, focusing on nursing homes and nursing personnel. But we also have to make sure that when the vaccine is distributed, it's accessible to people who've been hurt the most, the brown and black communities, which are not likely to be able to access, for example, Walmarts or access, we have to get to their neighborhoods. So it's a really difficult but doable project, but it has to be well planned. And that's what we're in the process of beginning to do now.
And I know you just appointed, or it was just reported that you're appointing somebody in the White House to be in charge of inequities in the healthcare system, which I assume this will be one of their first
That's
focuses.
one of the primary responsibilities. Look, folks who are African Americans and Latinos are the first ones hurt when something happens, the last ones recover. And you saw the statistics, and are somewhere, depending on which report you get and where you're talking about, from 4 to 5 times more likely, 3 to 4 times more likely to die if they get COVID. So they need the help, and they need to get it in immediately.
Madam Vice President-elect, most health experts, including Dr. Fauci, agree that elementary schools should be the last thing to close. Bars should close, restaurants should close, but elementary schools should be the very last one because the risk is minimal for what's happening in terms of what's happening to kids. And I know you've talked about this earlier, has been disastrous in terms of education, in terms of psychology. But there are many teachers and teachers' unions who are advocating for remote
All right, come on. This is bullshit.
Because they are afraid,
like seriously bullshit.
Of getting the virus. Will the Biden-Harris administration defer to the health experts or to the teachers' unions when it comes to elementary schools?
Well, honestly, Jake, I think it's a false choice. Both. The public health experts, of course, must be leaders in this conversation because we're having the conversation because of a public health epidemic, a pandemic. So they must help inform the decisions, but our educators are our educators. They are on the front line. They are most knowledgeable about the educational needs of our children. So both have to be participating in that conversation. But let's start from this place. Everyone wants our kids to go back to school. Every parent wants their kids to go back to school. Every teacher wants to educate those children. Every community benefits from those children getting an education. So there is wide consensus about the priority and the goal. And then we have to bring everyone together around how we achieve that in a way that is smart. And smart is about being prioritizing the safety of our children and their teachers and their families and their communities, and prioritizing the education of our children.
Jake, I would argue that I agree with everything the Vice President said, but I've spoken with the leaders of the unions, and there is a clear plan that's been laid out. We can safely open those elementary schools where the highest risk of people transmitting the disease, number one. Number two, we can make it safe for teachers if we invest in what needs to be done. Number one, sanitizing the schools. Number two, making sure that they have ventilation. Number three, making sure there's smaller pods of children, meaning you need more teachers. You got to pay for this stuff. It was estimated that we could open those schools for somewhere around $100 billion nationwide. That would be the cost for a year. We know how to do this. But the fact is, there's no money to do it. And you know better than anyone, because you've been reporting on it, the states are running out of money. They cannot continue to deficit spend. They can't deficit spend. And that's a federal government responsibility, short term, which will have long-term positive impact on growth and on the mental health and the educational capacity of our children.
Well, let's talk about this expense, because there is a lot of desire out there, I don't need to tell you, among the American people who are hurting, who are facing evictions, who are not able to put food on the table. The unemployment number still remains very high. And there's a desire for a relief package, another relief package, not just a desire, a need, a desperate need.
Yes.
And yet there's been gridlock in Washington. This week, a bipartisan group of senators unveiled a compromise bill that is more than Mitch McConnell wants, but less than Nancy Pelosi wants. Do you support that bill? Do you think that should go to the floor of the Senate?
I think if they could get the 900, what they're talking about, the number was, I think it was 900 billion.
Yes.
Yeah, $900 billion.
That would be a good start. It's not enough. It's needed, and they should focus on the things that are immediately needed. And what's immediately needed is relief for people in their unemployment checks, relief for people who are going to get thrown out of their apartments after Christmas because they can't afford to pay the rent anymore, relief on mortgage payments, relief on all the things that are in the original bill the House passed. But may have changed again today. I don't know. Maybe you know better. But in fact, the president said he wouldn't sign any such legislation. And then I'm told, I may be mistaken, because I'm not there not only every day, ever in the Senate anymore, but I'm told that there's somewhere between 20 and 22 Republican senators who say they won't vote for anything. But here's the deal. If Mitch McConnell just brought the bill up, just put it on the floor, I believe, Senator believes, or former senator, soon-to-be former senator believes, that it would pass. But it's a start. But look, people are really hurting. They're scared to death. And what's happening and teachers are prepared to go back if they know that there's something where there's masking, testing, they're available to them. They're able to be in a smaller pods. They need more help. But it's just not coming forward. And we know the answer.
When you say it's a start, the bill, the compromise bill, do you mean it's a start for negotiations? It's just an outline.
Oh, no. I think
they should pass it.
I think it should be passed, and I think that, in fact, that we're going to need more. I'm going to have to ask for more help
when you get there. Okay.
When we get there to get things done. Now, again, I have faith in Chuck and Nancy. I'm not doing the detailed negotiation. Matter of fact, one of the people deeply involved is the guy who took my spot in the United States Senate. Chris Coons is a brilliant guy. So I'm relying on their judgment as what the most basic things that are needed now.
Yeah,
and
who supports the compromise legislation? Madam Vice President, Vice President Pence right now is leading the COVID-19 task force. Are you going to continue that position? What will your specific portfolio be? And how do you plan on working with your new boss? Will you have weekly lunches? Will you be the last one he speaks to before he makes a decision, as then Vice President Biden did with then President Obama? How do you see your role?
Yes.
As to all of that? So COVID task force, weekly lunches.
I'll take the last point first, which is if the future is determined in any way based on what has been happening. We are full partners in this process, and I will tell you that the president-elect has been, since the first day he asked me to join him on the ticket, been very clear with me that he wants me to be the first and the last in the room. And so on every issue that impacts the American people, I will be a full partner to the president-elect and the president, and whatever our priorities are, I will be there to support him and support the American people.
Do you have a portfolio that you see yourself taking? Like he was in charge of the Recovery Act during the Great Recession. Is there? Will you head up the COVID task force? Is there an issue that you really want to focus on?
Jake, let me take a shot.
Sure.
I headed the Recovery Act, not because I said that's what I wanted to do. The deal the president and I made is the same thing I'm asking the vice president to do. And that is that there's so many things that are going to land on this president's desk, me in this case. As I said about Barack, everything but locusts is going to land on this. We have a significant problem. Whatever the most urgent need is that I'm not able to attend to, I have confidence in being turning to her. Just as it wasn't that Barack said, well, you know, Joe, we're going to have the stimulus and I want you to handle it. This was, we got to get this stimulus passed. I'm working on this. Look, Joe, you take it, okay? This is what I want you to do. So unlike the previous portfolio where Al Gore said, look, let me take care, let me do environment, let me do. When I was asked the question, when I asked her the question, no, I'll do whatever the urgent need is at the moment. And that's how it's going to work. And that's how, look, there's not a single decision I've made yet about personnel or about how to proceed that I haven't discussed it with Kamala first.
That's good.
What has been, she was one of your fiercest competitors in the early days of the primary, and now she and Doug Emhoff, which, by the way, is he the second gentleman? Is he the second dude? What should we be calling him?
Well, I think that the term has evolved into the second gentleman.
The second gentleman,
Yes,
okay.
yes,
I like
yes.
second dude, but
Yeah.
I will defer.
I think some of his friends are inclined to say that.
But you'll call him the second gentleman.
No, I'll call him honey.
You'll call him, okay. But now they're part of the team.
Yes.
They're no longer competitors. What's been the biggest surprise about working with her? I know you knew her before through Bo, but
Well, look, there hadn't been any surprise because we had the discussion about this beforehand. First of all, I understand how campaigns can sometimes get a little out of whack a little bit. And as I told her, you know, because you asked the question, I don't hold grudges. That's why Richard Brand Kramer questioned whether I was really Irish, you know, but all kidding aside.
the first lady to be told me she holds them for you.
Yes, she does. But not with she and Kamala have become friends.
Yeah.
But all kidding aside, it's a matter of the thing. We are simpatico on our philosophy of government and simpatico on how we want to approach these issues that we're facing. And so I don't have, and when we disagree, it'll be just like so far. It's been just like when Barack and I did. It's in private. She'll say, I think we should do A, B, C, or D. And I'll say, I like A, don't like B and C. And it's okay. And like I told Barack, if I read something where there's a fundamental disagreement we have based on a moral principle, I'll develop some disease and say I have to resign. We don't have that. We haven't, and we discussed at length our views on foreign policy, on domestic policy, on intelligence. And the great thing is she has a background in the Senate on intelligence, the Intelligence Committee. She has a background in the Senate on a whole range of things that are going to be pertinent to what we have to do. But it's going to be, I think so much is going to be incoming, Jake.
Yeah.
It's a matter about who takes what when.
I don't need to tell you, Mr. President-elect, that the NAACP is suggesting that they are disappointed so far that there haven't been more Black Americans named to high-profile positions present company accepted, and that Jim Clyburn said he's watching your cabinet picks and, quote, I can think of at least 10 Black folks that qualify for every single one. One position you have yet to announce is Attorney General. Do you think, given George Floyd, Black Lives Matter, the social justice issues, the criminal justice reform issues, that a Black Attorney General would be the right direction?
Look, I'm going to be announcing the remaining 15 members of the cabinet. The first 8 members are the most diverse cabinet anyone in American history has ever announced. there are three white men. There are three men. There are 5 women. There are 5 people of color, 3 white people. I mean, this is going to be an incredibly diverse. I'm going to keep my commitment that the administration, both in the White House and outside in the cabinet, is going to look like the country. I'm going to be meeting with the NAACP board, I guess, and they told me Tuesday.
Yeah.
And so look, my job, their job is to push me. Every special interest, and I don't say that in a negative way. Every advocacy group out there is pushing for more and more and more of what they want. That's their job. My job is to keep my commitment, to make the decisions, and when it's all over, people will take a look and say, I promise you, you'll see the most diverse cabinet, representative of all folks, Asian Americans, African Americans, Latinos, LGBTQ, across the board. And so I think, and they're all forthcoming in the next month or so.
Last month, Senator Bernie Sanders told the Associated Press it would be, quote, enormously insulting if your cabinet, the Biden-Harris cabinet, ignored progressive voices. Who would you point to now as a leading progressive voice in the cabinet?
Well, we're not done yet, Jake, so we're not even halfway there. So I think that we should have this conversation when we're done. But
Is another interview offer you're making? Because I'll take it.
do you consider yourself a progressive?
No.
Department of Homeland Security.
Homeland Security?
Yeah, no, I'm serious.
He's a progressive.
Yeah, and there's a number of progressives that are you know, what I think people are saying is, a lot of people are saying, am I going to pick some very, very prominent and well-known progressive who sits in the House or the Senate right now? As close as everything is in terms of the House and the Senate, they are tough decisions to make. To pull somebody I'm going to badly need out of the Senate and we don't re-elect or have an appointment of somebody who is a Democrat. And so it is, I think people are going to see, not only at the cabinet level, but the sub-cabinet level, there's already people we've appointed, and we're going to appoint many more. But it is not, again, I understand the push. I truly understand the push.
When you take office, the Senate will either be 50-50, that's best case for you, or controlled by Republicans. Many Republican senators, including Senate Majority Leader Mitch McConnell, have not even yet called you to congratulate you or said publicly that you are the president-elect, just acknowledged basic reality. You have retained and remained optimistic about your ability to work with McConnell. Why have you not yet spoken with McConnell, and how can you be optimistic about working with a group of individuals who have not even yet acknowledged that you're the president-elect?
I say this tactfully.
You don't have to be tactful.
No, I do, because I don't want to. There have been more than several sitting Republican senators who privately called me and congratulated. And I understand the situation they find themselves in. And until the election is clearly decided in the minds where the Electoral College votes, they get put in a very tough position. And so that's number one. Number two.
Do you think the fever on that will break after the Electoral College meets?
With at least a significant portion of the leadership. I don't know that it's going to break across the board. I'm not saying that. It's not the same Senate. I don't mean in terms of their philosophy. It's not the same Senate personnel that I knew when I left the Senate. There are only about 35 or 30%, 40% that are there when I was in the Senate. But I'm confident. I'm confident that there's a number of things I've already spoken to several about. For example, there's an overwhelming consensus. We have to do the things to work on to deal with infrastructure, cancer, the things like, remember at the end of our last 2 months in office, you heard Senator Alexander on the floor saying that, referencing me in his farewell speech, saying, I felt like a butler standing outside Joe. We worked it out. We got something done. We only had, I think, something like 43 Democratic senators for the Biden moonshot and this approach. We ended up with 96 or 95, 94. We started off with about 100 and a few members of the House, 385, ended up at 95 in the report.
You're still confident.
Yeah, no, look, it's going to be hard. I'm not suggesting it's going to be easy. It's going to be hard, and I'm confident that on the things that affect the national security and the fundamental economic necessity to keep people employed, to get people employed, to bring the economy back, there's plenty of room we can work.
Vice President-elect Harris, you too have proposed an ambitious climate agenda. You've named John Kerry as your climate envoy. Realistically, any significant change is going to be an uphill battle with such a closely divided House and Senate, no matter how the Georgia runoffs go. What can you do that will both genuinely address the issue and won't just get reversed by the next Republican president, will actually be legislative?
No, I agree with you. Our agenda is pretty progressive, and some might call it ambitious, but we, the American people, and frankly the world, can't afford anything less. The clock is ticking rapidly on this issue, and the president-elect has made it very clear that we are going to approach this in a way that we know the vast majority have so much more in common than what separates us. We brought together through the policy, but also in practice, convened everyone from labor groups to Fortune 500 folks who there is a consensus among on what needs to happen. The president-elect was talking with the head of GM, and days later, we see that they're going to drop their resistance to California's rules on electric vehicles. So we have reason to be optimistic about what is possible. It will not be easy. It will require a convening. But as the president-elect always says, look, this, as much as anything, is also about jobs. It's about investing in research and development. It's about investing in the American worker with jobs that are well-paying jobs, good union, well-paying jobs. And I think that there is more consensus than one might think toward the approach.
If I can give you an example. The irony is we have 4 crises. The first crisis is COVID. Second is the economic close to recession and maybe worse. The third crisis is the inequity that exists and the racial inequity that exists. And the fourth crisis is climate. Ironically, they all work for one another. The first time the American people looked out there and said, my Lord, I guess all those things I heard about, and even though I don't live in neighborhoods that have large black populations, I didn't realize police actually do those kind of things like I saw with George Floyd. Or say that, you know, I met with, before I announced my climate plan, I knew what it would be. I went to all the major unions and said, guys, here's what I'm going to do, but let me tell you why it's in your interest. So what happens? We have labor and CEOs on the big board up here in a Zoom, and I said we're going to build 550,000 charging stations. And what happens? You have General Motors saying we want to own that market, and it's going to reduce greenhouse gases gigantically. We're going to be in that position. And you hear labor saying, and yeah, okay, we're all for that. We're going to have jobs. We're going to make money making the country green. And so it's not so much people when they stop and everybody told me, even my own team told me 10 months ago, you're not going to get unions to go along with you. Well, yes, they are, because they now realize they're not going to be left out. And they are the way to grow the economy. And you had folks like, you know, Moody's and Wall Street saying, my plan I put together will create 18.6 million jobs and $1 trillion additional growth in the GDP. So, I mean, I've always argued that if you help the people, like a $15 minimum wage nationally, it raises everybody. It raises the entire community. The wealthy do better, the middle class do better, and the poor have a way up.
Up next, our exclusive conversation continues. I asked the president-elect whether he wants outgoing President Trump at his inauguration. His response and much more after this quick break. Welcome back to the CNN special event, the first joint interview. The incoming Biden-Harris administration is not only confronting a deadly pandemic, but also divided government and a gridlocked Congress here in Washington, not to mention an outgoing president who will not acknowledge reality and concede. But I continued our conversation first with just a couple of the threats the U.S. is facing from abroad.
You're set to inherit a very complicated situation with Iran. Iran's top nuclear scientist was just assassinated in an attack that a senior U.S. official told CNN that is being attributed to Israel. How does that assassination complicate your efforts to have the nuclear deal be rejoined?
Quite frankly, Jake, it's hard to tell how much it's complicated. The first thing that I will attempt to do, and I've spoken with now over 20 heads of state, I've made it clear to our friends in NATO, the first calls that came in, that we have a rule of one president at a time. So I can't make policy, but I want to reestablish the close alliance relations we had both in Europe and in the Pacific. And part of that relates to the ability to get Europe back on our side. Europe now has basically stiff-armed the United States based on the president's embrace of autocrats and poking his finger in their eyes. And so I think it's going to depend a lot on what will change the circumstance if Europe comes along with the United States. But it's going to be a hard negotiation. I have no illusions about that. And the bottom line is that we can't allow Iran to get nuclear weapons. And look how damaging this policy the president has gone for. He has pulled out to get something tougher. And what have they done? They've increased the ability for them to have nuclear material. They're moving closer to the ability to be able to have enough material for a nuclear weapon. There's the missile issues. All those things, I think, are going to be very difficult. But I know one thing. We cannot do this alone. And that's why we have to be part of a larger group dealing not only with Iran, but with Russia, with China, and a whole range of others.
Let me ask you about China, if I can, Madam Vice President-elect. The President-elect has said he will not immediately remove the Trump tariffs on China. Should the Chinese government, in your view, be further punished for mishandling and hiding the truth about the novel coronavirus that began there?
Well, as the president-elect said, there's one president at a time, and we are not in the position of stating policy about our relationship with any of these countries at this moment. And frankly, we are early in the process, sadly, of getting information that is classified information. Our intelligence briefings just started, so we're not in a position to respond to that specifically. But certainly one of the things that is very clear is that this is going to be an administration that puts the public health professionals first and not politics first in the discussion about the cause, the reason, and the effect of COVID-19.
Jake, the president's approach to China has been backwards. My concern from the beginning, I spoke about it, and I met with Xi more times than anybody had up until the time we left office that I'm aware of, is to make it real clear to China. There are international rules that if you want to play by, we'll play with you. If you don't, we're not going to play, number one. Number two, it's not about punishing them for the COVID virus. It's about insisting that there be international norms that are established that they play by. For example, the idea that we make up about 20% of the world's economy, 25%, and they are, and we're not going along with the rest of our allies to make sure that in Europe and in Asia we insist that, for example, stopping the stealing of national secrets, stopping the stealing of artificial intelligence capacity. We have to make it clear that we will respond. For example, when you're in a situation where if you want to do business in China and you're a high-tech firm, you've got to have a 51% Chinese partner so they have access to your material. That's not going to happen in our administration. That's not going to happen.
President Trump is reportedly considering a wave of preemptive pardons for his adult children and for Rudy Giuliani. He's also floated the idea in private conversations, according to our reporting, of possibly pardoning himself, which he insists he has the power to do, though that has never been litigated. Does this concern you? All these
preemptive pardons?
Well, it concerns me in terms of what kind of precedent it sets and how the rest of the world looks at us as a nation of laws and justice. Look, our Justice Department is going to operate independently on those issues that how to respond to any of that. I'm not going to be telling them what they have to do and don't have to do. I'm not going to be saying go prosecute A, B, or C. I'm not going to be telling them that's not the role. It's not my Justice Department. It's the People's Justice Department. So the persons I pick to run that department are going to be people who are going to have the independent capacity to decide who gets prosecuted, who doesn't. Now, in terms of the pardons, you're not going to see in our administration that kind of approach to pardons. Nor are you going to see in our administration the approach to making policy by tweets. It's just going to be a totally different way in which we approach the justice system.
During the primary last year, Madam Vice President-elect, you told NPR that the Justice Department, quote, would have no choice but to prosecute President Trump, and that, quote, there has to be accountability. How does that square with what the President-elect has said about not telling the Justice Department to go after individuals?
We will not tell the Justice Department how to do its job. And we are going to assume, and I say this as a former Attorney General, elected in California, and I ran the second largest Department of Justice in the United States, that any decision coming out of the Justice Department, in particular the United States Department of Justice, should be based on facts, it should be based on the law, it should not be influenced by politics, period.
And I guarantee you that's how it will be run.
The second gentleman to be resigned from his law firm to avoid even the appearance of impropriety. When your son Hunter came under scrutiny during the campaign, you vowed, no one in my family or associated with me will be involved in any foreign operation whatsoever, period, end of story, unquote. Will your brothers, will your son take leave from any business interests, not just foreign, but any business interests that might create any, even appearance of impropriety?
My son, my family will not be involved in any business, any enterprise that is in conflict with or appears to be in conflict with an appropriate distance from the presidency and government.
President Trump has not said if he's going to attend your inauguration yet. Do you think it's important that he's there? You're laughing.
I think it would important only in one sense, not in a personal sense, important in the sense that we are able to demonstrate at the end of this chaos that he's created, that there is peaceful transfer of power with the competing parties standing there, shaking hands and moving on. I think that's an important, what I worry about, Jake, more than the impact on the domestic politics, I really worry about the image we're presenting to the rest of the world. You know, the rest of the world's looked at us, and you've heard me say this a number of times, and I apologize for repeating it. They followed us not just because the power, an example of our power, the power of our example. And look where we are now in the world. Look how we're viewed. They're wondering, my Lord, these things happen in tin horn dictatorships. This is not, it's not the United States. So in that sense, the protocol of the transfer of power, I think, is important, but it is totally his decision, and it's not, of no personal consequence to me, but I do think it is for the country.
You've been in public life for more than half a century. This was
As a kid, yeah.
Your third run for president, and you made it. You made it. What does it feel like, especially at this moment when this nation is in any number of crises, including the COVID crisis? What does it feel like? Are you daunted? Are you worried? Are you fearful? Are you exhilarated? What's the emotion that goes through you?
I'm determined. I'm confident that what I've said from the outset, I've never changed my view. This whole campaign for over almost going on 600 days, exactly what had to be done. We have to restore the soul of this country, meaning honor, decency, honesty, basic fundamental decency. The second thing, we have to rebuild the backbone of this country, the middle class. That in this time bring everybody along. And thirdly, we have to unite the country. They're all going to be difficult to do, but I've never veered from those three principles. And so I look at it as an opportunity to make an incredible contribution to the country. But I am not, as I said to you on other interviews, I'll take responsibility. When I fail, I'll acknowledge it, and I will not deny that I made a mistake, and I move on. This is a little bit not unlike what happened in 1932. There is a fundamental change not only taking place here in the United States, but around the world. We're in the middle of the fourth industrial revolution, where there's a real question of whether or not all the change in technology. Will there be middle class? What will people be doing? How do they? And there's genuine anxiety. That's why you're going to see me reaching out, continue to reach out, not just to the communities that supported me. I'm going to reach out to those who didn't support me. I mean, for real. Because I think a lot of people are just scared and think they've been left behind and forgotten. We're not going to forget anybody in this effort.
What goes through your mind as he prepares to take on the most important job in the world, and the outgoing president is lying about fraud, spending his time really focused entirely on trying to undermine him, whether that's the result of what he's doing or the purpose, I don't know. When he says that it's possible, when it's reported that it's possible he'll announce that he's running for office to run in 2024 on Inauguration Day, what goes through your mind?
I believe that we are all very fortunate that Joe Biden is going to be the next president of the United States. The American people deserve in their president to have someone who's truly patriotic, who loves our country, who puts the people of the country first, not themselves. That's Joe Biden. Joe Biden is truly a kind human being. Joe Biden is someone who has endured real struggle and sacrifice and pain. He also is someone who knows love. He is someone who has dedicated his life to public service. And there couldn't be a more extreme exercise in stark contrast between the current occupant of the White House and the next occupant of the White House. And I do believe our country is going to be the better for the outcome of this election and the election of Joe Biden as president.
Madam Vice President-elect, Mr. President-elect, thank you so much for this interview and this opportunity. Obviously, I'm sure everybody watching wishes you the best of luck in terms of beating back COVID, getting the economy back on track. So best of luck to both of you, and thanks again.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Sure, we're going to see a lot of one another.
Our CNN special event continues. What happened after our interview? Stay with us.